Let's take a look at some charts on Ripple from this week's article on Brave New Coin. So we'll start with the market cap, which is always an interesting subject because when you have a 100% pre-mined coin, as is the case for Ripple, market cap is kind of useless. This isn't a proof of work coin where coins are slowly released over time. So you'll see variations in Ripple's market cap. If you try to figure out like circulating supply, 44 billion tokens, it comes out to around 13 billion, which is actually probably less than Tether when you account for all of Tether's issued USDT across all chains. If we look at the Ripple quarterly report, which I do any chance I get, mainly just for this specific graphic, how much are they selling this quarter, last quarter versus the previous few quarters? So it looks like they had a ton of institutional sales. They've stopped their programmatic sales now for the past 4 or 5 quarters. And they made a ton of money here compared to Q1 2020. They're going to argue that it's a small percentage of total volume. Most of the volume that they've included in the report, from what I can tell, is just bogus anyway. So none of this really matters. All that really matters is they're selling a ton of Ripple through institutional direct sales, and they are making a profit on that as a company, even though they tell you that Ripple is different than XRP, the token. And I mentioned this in the article. They have tons of legal issues globally around the world. I didn't even include the Australia copyright trademark case, which I don't really think is super relevant to the price of XRP, but it just adds on to the ever-growing list of litigation against Ripple. I don't think that's going to end until there's a definitive answer about is Ripple a security from a U.S. institution. I don't think legal cases are going to stop. If we look at that circulation again, around 45 billion is in circulation. Ripple continues to hold 6%, and then the escrow, which mimics proof of work, is 49% of the total supply. So what happens here is 1 billion, I think, not 1 million, right? Let me just double check. Yeah, so each month 1 billion from the escrow gets unlocked and then is offered for sale. If it's not sold, it's put back in the escrow, and then that happens over and over again. So this increases on-chain metrics a lot, so it makes those useless. It makes things like NVT a lot less useful. Any way you can sort of measure normal blockchains, you can't really measure Ripple when they have this escrow that's constantly slushing supply back and forth once a month. There was a Cornell study recently that's in May that's found 94% of on-chain activity is not economic activity on Ripple. So then that kind of throws out the transactions metric. So you're kind of left with nothing as far as how to evaluate this thing. We can look at partnerships, and there's a billion of those. They haven't necessarily converted to on-chain activity, from what I can tell, specifically RippleNet stuff. You know, they keep adding banks to RippleNet, Santander, and a bunch of Japanese banks, SBI, all these partners, MoneyGram, but it isn't converting to token usage from what I can tell. They just had an update looking at the total number of nodes here to 1.6, and that was about 6 days ago. So you can kind of tell the percentage of nodes that are like centralized because they instantly switch to the upgrade typically. Most people in general, hobbyists or people part of the community, it takes them a few days to realize, oh, there was an upgrade. I gotta update that. I gotta refresh my nodes, that sort of thing. So this is probably the percentage of people who are actual part of the network, around 65%. If you look at transaction counts and fees have continued to decline since 2018. They're basically the lowest for any crypto that has fees. Transactions per day have increased substantially over the past couple months to above 1 million, 1.2 or something like that. If you get rid of the spam attack, it's effectively an all-time high for transactions per day on Ripple. But again, if 94% of that is not economic activity, how do you even evaluate this, right? Yes, it should be bullish for anything else, but I don't know. Look at active addresses. They've increased slightly over the past few months, kind of back in the range here, nothing too crazy. And average transaction sizes haven't changed for the past year. NVT looks bullish because it keeps declining over time. It's down certainly since 2015. But because the escrow stuff it's hard to actually take any of this seriously, because if you're moving that many tokens regularly on chain, it's going to lower this falsely. So this looks super bullish, but in actuality, you can't really use it seriously as a metric for Ripple. If we look at Google Trends for Ripple, they've been flat for the past 2 years with a small uptick recently. A small uptick in mid-2019 when price also moved up. So if price is moving up, Google Trends are probably also moving up. Look at some technicals. BIF and X long shorts, yearly pivots, VPVR, 50, 200 EMA. Volume, I think most of this is Jed McCaleb. Selling on Bitstamp, which is what I'm looking at specifically for this chart, because the volume on any other exchange does not look like this for Ripple, and RSI. So the main technical metric I'd look at here is, are we trending or are we ranging? And we look pretty much range bound since, mid 2018, basically flatlined. We've certainly broken above this clearly bearish pitchfork. So you can say, okay, the bear trend is probably over, but do we have a new bull trend? I think the case for that is weak, although we do have a bullish 5200 cross for the first time since mid last year. We're tapping this pivot again. We're above previous VPVR support resistance, all this stuff here. There's some VPVR resistance at 30 cents, yearly pivot resistance at 40 cents. So those will be the next levels on the way up. But as far as downside is concerned, there's plenty of support now at the 200 and at the 20-cent zone. So if I'm Jed McCaleb and I see this, I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to bump up my algorithmic selling because the market looks like it can handle it. So if you're looking at a whale selling constantly, it's hard to imagine buying potential that can, exceed that. He's just got billions and billions of Ripple to sell still. So if I'm him, I'm just going to continue to do that, right? Like, I'm not part of the project anymore. I have a competing project. So for me, that's really going to limit the upside here. And if we look at the cloud, it's also bullish. It was bullish since mid-July with the Kumo breakout here. It's getting a little overbought. You can see with this TKC clamp, bit of an M double top. So price wants to return to 25 cents, which is also near the 200 EMA, 200-day EMA. And then lastly, looking at the XRPBTC chart, it looks the most bullish it's looked since late 2018. But at the same time, it's also not explicitly bullish. You can see it's weaving in and around the 200-day EMA. It's underneath all this VPVR resistance. So really it needs a clean break of 2,500 sats, and then it will likely touch 5K sats. That's my guess. I don't see this making extreme lows beyond 500 sats. Like, if this dips to 500 sats, it might even be a buy for me, just because of how oversold it'll be over the past 2 years. And it's already down 92% from all-time highs. If it's at 500 sats, it's basically at all-time lows, or tapping that. It can't really get much lower than that feasibly, unless the supply programmatic escrow gets unlocked, or unless Jed just sells a bunch at once. It's probably not going to stay at 500 sats, but this is really the buy zone for me, way down here. I'm not touching this up at 2K sats or even 2,500 sats for the upside. Just waiting to buy that blood way lower.